All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get wet, simulate falling out of a raft, and then we're gonna start our protocol. You ready? All right, 1, 2, 3. First thing, Puffy, if you need to move around to get some body heat going, jump up and down, go ahead. Part of this process is having gear that's going to allow you to manage moisture in an extreme situation like this. If you're around water in the winter, it's absolutely critical that your systems can manage moisture.
I already feel a lot better.
All right, pants on. So the reason you feel better is because you're not just immediately giving that heat up to this atmosphere through evaporative cooling. There's just a little bit of breeze, but there's probably a little convective cooling. What are you doing?
I was getting your...
You got your puffy pants on?
Yeah.
You're gonna have about 5 minutes before your hands stop functioning. You can put on gloves if you got them. Right now, we've sought some shelter from clothing, but it's not going to be enough. So we've got to get this shelter set up and get inside. All right, grab your bag, throw it in the vestibule. I'll climb in after you. You will go downhill quick, and once hypothermia sets in and you start to not think clearly, then things can really spiral out of control. Now that we're good, we're puffed up, we've stopped body heat loss,
right,
and we're trying to now reverse that body heat loss, right? We also need to stoke our internal combustion engine to create fire, to start pushing moisture out. So a technical clothing system is not going to absorb a lot of water, but the water it does absorb, we need to get rid of. We were cold and wet, now we're wet and we're warming.
Right.
So we're improving our situation, right? Sometimes hiking back to the tent because you don't have the proper equipment maybe is a better course of action, but you're improving your situation.
Okay.
This static rewarming drill is really worst case scenario. Like, hey, we have no other choice. We're setting up right here and we're riding it out until we are warm and dry. If that's the next 18 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is. Once we've stabilized the situation, which I think you and I would both agree we have,
100%.
now we need to try to reverse that so we can now get ourselves out of here, right? Extract ourselves and not become a statistic or have to ask somebody to come get us out, right? So let's break out the stove. Let's start getting some hot drinks, and then we'll feed ourselves some hot food. That's fuel for our combustion engine, and it's gonna be amazing when you do that. You're almost going to start to sweat. As soon as we start eating this food, it's going to be amazing how much warmer we are. Like, you're going to feel the engine get cranked.
Nice.
So I'm feeling warm. I know moisture is moving through the system, but you know, one of the reasons I wore solid colors is because it's easier to see.
Oh, good point.
But you can see some moisture starting to come through the bag.
Oh yeah.
All right, so as I zip down, so now you can start to see more moisture coming through this next layer.
Oh yeah. Huh.
But then if you zip down, so this was my outermost layer. You can see where it's already starting to dry.
It's crazy.
So clearly there's moisture moving through this system of layers or baffles, right? And then, I don't know if you can see that, if it's showing up, but this is starting to dry now as well.
Sure is. Wow.
So, I mean, we overwhelmed this clothing system with water.
Yeah.
But in a worst case scenario, it's got to be able to manage that fairly proficient.
Man, you can literally feel the steam rolling off of these layers.
Yeah.
That's wild. I
have a synthetic base layer top. I hybrid active insulation layer. So this is the ambient hoodie.
Yep.
I've got a Kelvin light down puffy jacket, and then I've got the Kelvin Aerolite synthetic bag.
Gotcha.
So yeah, you have a wind layer.
I do. Yep.
So I will tell you. So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So wind stopper and the wind layer is one of my favorites. What I would suggest when you get done eating is taking that layer off, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because that layer, that laminate, is going to slow down you drying out those other layers, because it's got to get pushed through that moisture with your heat source, that laminate.
Okay.
So to speed it up, if you take that layer off, that layer is going to dry here because it really doesn't absorb any moisture.
Okay.
And it's going to speed up the efficiency with which you can dry that system.
Okay.
So, not saying you shouldn't, you know, I wear them all the time, but when you get to a point, like if we were wearing rain gear and fell in the river, you want to take off any laminate, be it wind stopper or a Gore-Tex layer, because it's going to slow that dry process down.
Okay.
So that's why you don't sleep in your Gore-Tex.
Right.
Because if you do, as your metabolism slows down at night and the moisture is moving through, it'll hit the inside of that rain gear and actually won't be able to push through, and you'll actually be damp on the inside.
Okay.
It's the same thing here. We're trying to find efficiency, and so we want to remove as many barriers to that as possible.
Okay. So the timing wise, the right time to do that would be after exiting the water, before I puff up?
No,
okay.
Absolutely not.
Go ahead.
You are not stopping to do anything but insulate yourself and protect yourself. Now that we're in here, we've eaten, we're starting to, we stabilize the situation. Now it's just going to, right now it's just a matter of time.
Right.
By tomorrow morning, we will be completely dry. Not that we're necessarily going to stay here till tomorrow morning, but to aid in that efficiency, we want to remove those barriers, right? So if as an example, if your pants are completely soaked still, now that we're in here, now that we're okay, if you want to take those pants off and wring them out, absolutely go ahead and do that.
Okay.
But it's not the first course of action, because you only have so much time before you start to go downhill. Stabilize the situation, seek shelter, reverse the heat loss, stop it and then reverse it, build your metabolism back up to start drying yourself out. Now we're into the next stage of, okay, now what are we going to do? What's our course of action? Can we get out in 3 hours? Are we going to wait till the next morning? What is that? What is that next course of action?
Okay.
If we need to wring something out, then so be it. And depending on the layer, some of them may need that, some of them may not, right? So it's all just going to depend. But now that the immediacy of the situation is gone, now we can start to figure out those nuances and go, okay, hey, how about you take off your windstopper layer? Hey, I'm going to wring my pants out. We'll put them back on. Our body is the heat source. It's the only way we're going to dry it.
Sure.
But now is the time to do that, because we're out of the environment.
Okay. That makes sense.
So one of the things you have to consider in these scenarios is these boots are never going to dry out, ever, in this environment. And so to put a warm, dry sock, my feet are dry, they're warm, into this cold, wet boot, I'm gonna immediately set myself up for foot issues, be it frostbite over time, it's still very cold outside, trench foot if it wasn't quite as cold. And so there's something called a vapor barrier sock. And what these are is essentially a waterproof, non-breathable sock. And they can be used in several different ways. But in this scenario, what I like to do is put them over my warm, dry sock. And so what that's going to do is that's going to protect that warm, dry sock from this cold, wet boot. And although they won't breathe, and that sock inside will build up into a warm atmosphere, and my foot will sweat a little bit, it'll be easily dried at night in my tent. But these VBL socks are critical anytime you're going to be around water, especially in a cold environment, to help protect you from these cold boots, because these boots are never going to dry. They're always going to be cold, and they're kind of a weak point in the system, and so you have to figure out how to work around that. So we spent about 3 hours warming up from the time we got in the water till now. We're not completely dry, but we are on the way to being dry. You can see things as we go through. The moisture's still moving through, but you know, we're out here in the environment, not cold at all. Certainly could either, you know, establish better anchors for our tent and kind of stabilize this camp for the night. We would definitely want to stay here and continue to dry out. You know, anything that was like our backsides we were sitting on or laying down are, you know, not as dry. They need to kind of continue to dry out over time. So if we were going to stay here by tomorrow morning, I have no doubt we would be completely fine. If we needed to move camp right now for whatever reason, we've absolutely stabilized the situation and we can do that. I can't stress enough safety. So there were people behind the scenes, you know, watching to make sure that we were safe. I don't ever condone getting in a frozen, wet, slushy river in winter. You know, a better way to do this is just to have some clothing in a bucket of water, and you can do it in your backyard or at a local trailhead and have a more controlled process. But, you know, just wanted to show you the capabilities of a technical system, not just the clothing, but the sleeping bag, the stoves, the shelter, working together, and the performance it can create to give you that safety and potentially save your life in the backcountry.